Welcome to Beyond the Box. Inside, outside, upside, downside, beyond the box.
Break it down.
Our guests are insiders, now on the outside and the right side, dropping truth and nuclear intel bombs and breaking it down just for you. And now it's time to meet your hosts and co-hosts. Your hosts of Beyond the Box are Brenda Lankarch and Suzanne Hott. Brenda Lankarch is host of Beyond the Box and retired law enforcement. Joined by Suzanne Hott, host of Beyond the Box, Joel's Indoor Arena and Event Center, and White Horse Productions. They are joined by Tom Althouse, Brian Sang, and Penny L.A. Shepard. Brian Sang, co-host Beyond the Box, is Full Disclosure Now Movement, fulldisclosuremovement.org. Tom Althouse, co-host Beyond the Box, is the real author of The Matrix, The Immortals, and The Matrix Redeemed. And Penny L.A. Shepard, executive producer and co-host of David Zublick's Awake Nation, The Dark Outpost, Patriot's Perspective, and Beyond the Box. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Break it down.
Inside, outside, upside, downside, beyond the box. Beyond the Box begins now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Box. Today is April 19th, 2024. And we have a guest tonight. His name is Jim Scott. He's former Marine Corps Major, Virginia State Trooper, and he attempted to open the JFK files, which is very interesting to me. I just love it. But before we start tonight and bring everybody in, Susie and I have decided together that we're going to do a little something different. Everybody that comes on this show, that is involved in this show and watches this show in one way or another, has some form of being attacked because Satan is mean. So everybody that's been put in dark spaces, whether it's of their own doing or others, we want them to have a safe place here. So with that being said, I'm going to hand this over to Susie. Go for it, ma'am.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
You kind of froze. You froze. I don't know.
I did.
You're frozen in the screen on my. Yeah. It's kind of weird.
Be. I'm moving.
Right?
You're moving. Am I
there
moving?
You are.
Out
now
there?
You're moving. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
You're moving now.
Okay. All right, Susie.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I had a bit of a traumatic. Day today.
Yeah, I heard. My gosh.
Yes, I was one of my little horses got bit in the ear by a big horse, and it took the end of her ear off, and it was quite traumatizing because he picked her up in the air, and the weird thing is the mother, Brenda, had an ear injury many years ago, and it kind of messed up the end of her ear. So it's kind of like the saying now, like mother like daughter. So now the baby has the same kind of ear issue. I'm like, what the heck? Okay. So, but she's fine.
Good.
We put some medicine on it, but she's missing the tip of her ear.
Yes.
So with that being said, I had a good day other than that.
All right. You want to start us off with our little thing that we discussed that we're going to start doing on the show because we all need it.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. We just want to say a prayer. We just want to ask the Father and to watch over and protect each and every one of us. And we just pray that um, that God will give us all direction, and this show will help. Will help each and every one of us get there, because there's a lot of evil in this world that we're all up against. And I just ask that in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and start bringing everybody out. I'm going to bring in our co-host of Does the Most, Miss Penny L.A. Shepherd.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Box.
Yes. And then backstage, I also have our handsome and brilliant Tom Althouse.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm ready for my close up, Mr. DeMille.
We got to get him a powder puff.
Yeah. Makeup, hair. Okay. Thank you, darling. Thank you. Coffee girl.
I want to say hello to Maria, Norma, and Elizabeth and Brent, and thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy tonight. Penny, do you want to introduce Mr. Jim?
Well, Susie and I met Jim. I actually met Jim when an individual came on our show, Barbara Honiger. She wrote October Surprise. And she was also on a 911 commission. She worked in the White House under Reagan and Bush. And also, I think under Colby died in a canoe accident, which prompted my joke about the perfume, which is canoe. And so when anyone gets in very deeply, I say, hey, canoe. Because he could canoe and he ended up dead in a canoeing accident. That's not a boating accident. Anyway, so when Jim came on the show, he came on to talk with James Files, who is a very good friend of his. And James Files, as we know, we had Pamela on last week, is the shooter who was on the grassy knoll who killed JFK. He's written, she has ghostwritten many books for him. So Jim has helped put on some of the JFK, events that have occurred. And I went up due to Susie's prompting to interview James Foss this last November. And we actually got an opportunity to meet Jim in person. And so with that, let's bring him in and let him tell us who he is and how he got started and what he's doing now.
Sure. Hello, Jim.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yep.
can. So, Jim, can you tell us a little bit about your history and how it was that you, throughout all the things that you've done, how you ended up meeting James Falls? But let's start with your history in the military and also as a helicopter pilot.
Okay, I grew up born in Florida, in Bradenton, and moved to Central Virginia with my parents as a kid. Went through public schools here, and was able to. I was skinny and fast when I was in high school, and I was nationally ranked in the high hurdles, and got a scholarship to the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. 4 years there got me a commission in the Marine Corps, and I went to Pensacola through flight school, and then ended up on the East Coast near Camp Lejeune at the Marine Corps Air Station at New River. I was on active duty about 12 years, and Clinton had got elected, and the whole thing about the just a lot of the changes that were going to happen in the military at that time. I had gotten divorced after about 7 years in the military, and I was looking for an opportunity to just get out and get away from it and have a real normal life. I was gone from home many years, Christmas, birthdays, all that stuff. So I got out of the Marines, and I went through a couple different jobs, but I landed at the Virginia State Police, and I was a trooper for 8 years with the Virginia State Police. During that time frame, I saw James Files. There was a video. Believe it, this is hard to believe because Pam met James exactly the same way. There's a video that you could rent at Blockbuster. and it was called Confession of an Assassin. And I just saw it one day, and something attracted me to it. I was working night shift, and I watched this video, and it was James Files confessing to the JFK assassination. And the thing is, as I watched it, I was looking for every kind of sign I could that this guy was lying. And I'd never heard of him before. And I'm not a JFK assassination, freak. I haven't read, 2,000 books about it or anything like that. But I saw this video, and the one thing he mentioned, I sort of remembered who Johnny Roselli was, and there were books that I'd read about the CIA, and the stories that Johnny Roselli the mafia had been hired to kill Fidel Castro, and the agency offered the Chicago outfit $100,000 to kill Castro. Now, keep in mind, they had lost all their casinos and hotels and all that kind of stuff on the beach in Havana, and the millions of dollars in 1959 when Fidel Castro took over Cuba was a lot of money. And this was their opportunity to maybe get their property back. And apparently, Johnny Roselli told the controllers at the CIA, both David Atlee Phillips and some of the other executives there that he spoke with, that he would kill Castro for free because he was a patriot. But I suspect the mafia wanted to get their real estate back, obviously. So anyway, that morphed into the Bay of Pigs operation. And then when Kennedy would not go along with the CIA's plan, because the Bay of Pigs was planned to fail so they could send in the Marines and we could get into another war and forcibly take Cuba back, because they had all they needed basically was the nuclear atomic weapons in Cuba threatening the people of the United States, all that stuff. And when the Bay of Pigs failed and JFK would not let the Department of Defense take over the operation and invade Cuba, a lot of people turned against President Kennedy. Now, I have grilled James Files about this for over 2 years. And if I can digress for a second back to when I was a state trooper, I saw this video and I basically came to the conclusion, well, if Johnny Roselli had meetings with the CIA in Virginia, that was a crime if it involved a conspiracy to kill the president. And what I wanted to do is get my higher management at the state police to offer him immunity from prosecution. And I wanted to go to Statesville Prison in Illinois and interview him. And I really thought that this was, if we could get the door open and he would make the same confession to the state police, because he didn't have anything to worry about in Virginia. He hadn't committed any crimes here. And we could promise him prosecution. But, there's no statute of limitations on murder. And this is in the late 90s. So, it was 36 years after the assassination. So I just basically went to one of my supervisors. I skipped my immediate supervisors and went outside to a first sergeant that I trusted who was connected with Richmond. And I said, hey, this is what I've got. What do you think? And he said, well, let me talk to somebody in Richmond that I know. And it's very interesting. But I can't promise you anything or whatever. And we ran James Files' criminal history and found out who he said he was and where he was incarcerated and all that stuff. And I really wanted to just, if we could offer him where he didn't have any legal jeopardy in Virginia, just get him to repeat what he said and then see where that went. Sometimes when you can just see through the crack in a door, you can see a little bit of light gets through, you can see in something else, So basically what happened is this first sergeant, and this is kind of hearsay because I wasn't in the loop on this stuff, but apparently he went to this lieutenant that worked in the like admin section at, and I guess he's the guy that would have done the outside work for, go to another agency or whatever. And apparently he called the FBI and said, hey, look, we got this trooper that saw this video and this guy claims that he's the JFK shooter and all that. And there's a link between Johnny Roselli and the mob and the CIA in Virginia. And we want to take a look at this. And this is the part that I can't, I don't know exactly what the conversation was, but I understand that they came back to me and said, look, you need to forget this and drop it because it'll probably cost you your job if you push this issue. So I did that. Well, shortly after that, this lieutenant in state police headquarters was apparently, what can I say? I want to say his office was raided, but I don't really know the details. But apparently the FBI came to the state police and said, we're going to seize this guy's computer, his state police computer, because we have evidence that he's downloading kiddie porn on his computer. And so apparently they suspended the lieutenant, and when I was at the academy, he was a first sergeant. And actually he was in charge of the DARE program.
Okay, I remember that.
The thing about him being in charge of the DARE program is that's all the cops that work around, high school kids. And that's the only thing I can think of. I mean, this guy was a straight arrow. He was kind of a ladies' man. I can't even fathom, I can't believe that he would be involved in downloading kiddie porn. I think what they wanted was his computer, and they wanted to know what he knew about the JFK stuff. And the bottom line was he was found in the woods behind his house the next morning, dead, I guess, or that evening. And they claimed that he went home and committed suicide, and that there was something on his computer that he didn't want people to see. And that was kind of it. And I didn't hear anything else about it. All I know is they just wrote it off. It was a suicide and all that. He was from my county. They came back here, had to honor, like a convoy of police cars, and they brought him back here and buried him, and it was case closed. And I don't think after what would be, I guess the 25 years or so ago, that the FBI will come hunt me down and kill me, because all this stuff, everything that we're talking about has been online and has been published in books and is out there and has been for years. So, but apparently they did not want, I suspect that, somebody in a powerful place, either that the FBI or CIA or whatever, wanted to know how this lieutenant with the state police found out who this Grassy Knoll shooter was, and wanted to stop, that becoming public knowledge. But keeping in mind, you could rent the video at Blockbuster.
Right.
Which is kind of crazy. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I mean, you could just say, hey, this is nutty. Forget about it. You guys barking up the wrong tree, and just drop it and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so I just kind of dropped it. And a few years after that, I was in a shooting at the state police, and it was a justified shooting, all that. The guy went to jail for 11 years. He was a coke dealer. It was the third time he'd been arrested for distribution of cocaine. And it's a long story. It's not relevant to the JFK stuff. But not long after that, the first assignment I had when I came back on the road after my shooting and the investigation was I was with the Secret Service's security detail when George W. Bush dedicated the D-Day Memorial in Bedford County, Virginia, on the 6th of June, 2001. And, I just worked the road for a little bit longer, and I kind of felt like they, thought I was a loose cannon or something like. I mean, I don't know why they would let me, if they thought I was, after the shooting that I was, wasn't competent to be a state trooper or something, why they would let me come back and be within pistol range of the president of the United States. So they must have trusted me, you know what I mean? But anyway, so I just kind of dropped the issue. Well, years later, 2.5 years ago or something, I discover that there's this book available, which I would recommend to your audience. And if your audience listening will get a piece of paper and a pen, I'm going to say a couple things when I talk tonight that you might want to write down. But there's this book, and it's entitled Primary Target JFK. And it says how the CIA used the Chicago mob to kill the president. And it's a tell-all book about the JFK assassination from James Files' perspective based on like a question and answer. They answered all the questions they've been asked over the years about how it happened. And the book, you can get, this is when you purchase this and go to their website, and I'll say what it is in just a minute. And by the way, I'm not selling anything. I don't get a penny of this or anything like this. It's not a promotion for me or anything. I'm just trying to help them. You can.
I've got it too.
There you go. When you order the book, you get a hardcover autographed copy if you order it from the website I'm going to tell you. Now, you can get it from Amazon and Author House, but you don't get an autographed copy. And the other thing that Jim does, when he autographs the book, he puts his thumbprint in it. I don't know if you can see that very well, but his thumbprint's in it. And this is actually a copy that I got. It's already autographed to a friend of mine who I went to college with, who retired off the 7th floor at the CIA. And he's on the download now. I haven't been able to find him. But the book's available, an autographed copy for $80, and it'll be worth a mint in the future, that when it comes out that he's actually the grassy knoll shooter. So, but anyway, I find out that James is alive and that he's gotten out of prison and that this book has been written, and you can get it at this website. So I ordered a book immediately and asked and put in the comment section. I said, hey, if you actually know who, James Files, and you can let him know that I was with the Virginia State Police and tried to reopen the case and get him immunity and let this truth. Now, this truth, if the Virginia State Police had let me do this, and I guess if the FBI had let the Virginia State Police do it, if that's the case, this information would have been public knowledge, like 25 years ago. And they still 60 going on 61 years after the assassination are doing their damnedest to keep this covered up. But some of the biggest secrets of this country, I'm going to reveal them tonight. And I believe I could prove them in court. And I believe the American people would believe, what happened. And because it all makes perfect sense. Some of the specific things that have been claimed by James, they've done their best to discredit him. And I know, like on 2 or 3 occasions, congressmen have attempted to call him to Congress to testify, and the CIA has intervened and said you can't let him testify because it will endanger national security. And really, the biggest danger of James Files testifying before Congress is that the American people will find out, as they will tonight if they listen to what I have to say, is that the CIA killed John F. Kennedy. And that's exactly what happened.
You know what? I think there's a lot of us that have no doubt about that. It's been something that it's been suspected for years.
Yeah.
So, and the whole thing of them keeping that all covered up, they treat us like we are class A morons, stupid.
It's true.
And we all figure things out. Like I've been in this game now I grew up around it with my dad. So for decades, but when you talk about it a few years ago, people were like, you're crazy. Shut up. So you just keep it to yourself and hope that one day it just all spills out.
There's a really good book written by a man named Robert Clayton Buick. And he's written about 9 books, 7 of which are about assassinations and JFK. And he was a CIA asset, and he's 92 now. He lives in California. Really good guy. He wrote a book called Assassination. Robert Clayton Buick. I think you can get it on, and they're fairly inexpensive. You can get those on eBay. And actually the cover art for that book, I've got one. If we have to take a break sometime, I'll go get it and I'll show it later. But the cover art is a painting of JFK's face, and his head is bursting like a watermelon. And that painting that was used on the cover of that book was painted by James Files in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. That's a big kind of secret about that book. But anyway, so going back to James, I don't know where you'd want to start on him, but I can a lot of people are probably dying to know what happened in Dealey Plaza. We can run over that, and then I can digress and talk about James's life, or I go wherever you want to go. What do you want to do?
You
Hey,
take us on
that's
a journey.
Lead the
fine.
way. Lead the way.
That's
Okay,
right.
so James Files, his actual birth name on his, if you pull up his criminal history, his real name is James Earl Sutton, Sutton. He changed his last name to Files, Files, about a year after he killed John F. Kennedy because he was getting married and he wanted to kind of get away from his past, if you can understand that. Now, if to run through his entire life, he's 82 now, and the stuff that I've learned in the last 2.5 years, we don't have time on this show, but I'll give you a couple minutes. He was born January 24th, 1942, in a small town in very rural Alabama. Shortly after he was born, a few years, I think, his mother moved him. I think his mom married a man named Sutton, and that's how he took the name Sutton. Okay, so then his mother ended up moving to Melrose Park, and he grew up with a bunch of mafia guys in Melrose Park, Illinois, right outside Chicago. Okay. And he knew when he was a young kid, he used to do chores for a lot of the old mobsters, even to the point that he would, drive them to the grocery store and help them get stuff and come home and sit on the front porch and talk with them. If he was in better health, what somebody should do is sit down with him and have him basically recite the history. He knows so much stuff. We've talked about stuff. He won't talk about anybody in the unit that is not dead. He doesn't want to get anybody in trouble or in prison or anything like that. And he is a killer. He killed people for the mafia and the CIA and in the army. But he, starting at 8 years old, he went to a school called Camp Hero on Montauk Island in New York. I think that's it's the northern end of Long Island or something like that. But in Montauk, that area up there, and you can look it up online. It's a pretty well-known school. And he went to that school until he was 17. And on his 17th birthday, he joined the Army. He went through boot camp and airborne school and was assigned to the 82nd Airborne, and then was shipped off for Operation Mobile White Star to Laos. And he was involved in all kinds of, not just combat, but he saw a lot of special ops kind of dirty dealing and stuff there. And they were basically smuggling opium. Okay. The CI set up a big ring and they were smuggling opium. It came back. And a lot of it, apparently, he said that a lot of it came back like during the Vietnam War. Some of it was sewn up in the bodies of the dead soldiers, and then it was taken out when it got back.
Who was president that time?
Well, let's see. During what time? In Laos? I guess it would have been there was Eisenhower, Truman, and then Eisenhower, and then Kennedy. And then let's see. And then you got after him is Johnson and Nixon, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but Vietnam started really early, and there's a really good Fletcher Prouty, Colonel Fletcher Prouty. He's in the movie JFK. He's Mr. X. He's the guy that gives the speech. His character is Donald Sutherland, and he's talking to Kevin Costner. That's the Jim Garrison, the guy that was trying to convict Clay Shaw of being involved. But that was the mobster. Oh God, what was his name? Marcello. That he ran the mob down in New Orleans. But anyway, long story short, backing up to Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs went bad, one of the things that happened, and James Files tells me that that this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. The British MI6 contacted Alan Dulles at the CIA, and they wanted us to kill a British general who was going to publish his memoirs. And that man's name was Alan Brooke, Brooke. and he was a viscount. He was like a field marshal. Okay. And he was going to, his memoirs and his, I guess, autobiography was going to disclose a bunch of classified information that included, now keep in mind now, this is about 1960, and his memoirs were going to disclose that the British at Bletchley Park were the ones that broke the German code called the Enigma code, and the Enigma machines, the typewriter, and that they were able to read the Germans' mail and all that. It was counterintelligence information that the British didn't want to release. But Alan Brooks said, hey, World War II's over. We can talk about this. I'm writing it in my memoirs. And I guess they didn't have such a formal, approval procedure like they do now. If you're at the agency, you have to sign like a non-disclosure agreement, and your manuscript has to go through Langley to be approved. But Alan Brooke was going to also write a bunch of disparaging remarks about how Eisenhower was not a very good tactician, how Omar Bradley was an idiot, and just a lot of disparaging stuff. And they were also going to disclose that an OSS agent, an American agent named Douglas Bazata, is the man who arranged the death of General George S. Patton. Patton was assassinated. He was not killed. He didn't die from the results of that car accident, the truck accident, where his Cadillac was hit by a Army truck. They had him in the hospital, and the day that they were going to transport him to Germany, he was sitting up in the bed talking to members of the press, smoking a cigar and eating lunch. And they scurried everybody out of the room. They said, okay, that's all done for now. We got to get the general ready for transport and all that. And a couple hours later, he was dead. He was supposed to die in the accident, but the plan didn't work out right. But Patton was he didn't get along well with the Russians, and he actually wanted to enlist the German army and turn around and keep attacking into Russia, because he said that he actually said we're fighting the wrong people. I don't know if you guys have studied enough history and you know about this stuff, but Patton went off the reservation a little bit, and but Douglas Bazata actually announced this. There was a reunion of OSS officers at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C., and I've stayed there a few times when I take my daughters to the Smithsonian when they were little. And in that big auditorium where they used to have the big political rallies, Douglas Bazata announced that he was paid $10,000 to kill George Patton, right in front of 400. It was top secret up until then. But this country, the CIA does a lot of really good things. There are a lot of really wonderful people. Thousands and thousands of great people work for the Central Intelligence Agency. We need an intelligence agency, but they don't need to be running this country and the world. They don't need to be, once we elect an official, if that official, like Richard Nixon, who wanted to hear about the Kennedy assassination and he wanted to know about the extraterrestrials, they ran Watergate on him and ran him off. Okay. Trump comes in there, mixes up the mud a little bit, and look what they do to him. 51 intelligence people sign a affidavit saying that the, Russia, this hoax that he's colluding with Russia and all this kind of stuff. And they signed this affidavit that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. You know what I mean? So it's, you got the deep state is going after our presidents and successfully. The CIA has overthrown this country, the way I look at it, at least 3 times. Go ahead.
The word is out there that George Patton's son is Donald Trump. Just putting it out there.
I don't know.
We don't know anything these days. You just have to keep your mind open to any and all possibilities.
Yeah.
I did a wiki on Alan Brooke. He died the 17th of June, 1963. So that was 5 months before the assassination? Do you think that
so that's what happened?
He died of a heart attack.
Yeah. And it says that he died in bed with his wife. That's a lie. Okay. If you're looking at Wikipedia.
Yeah. What happened?
What happened was, so the CIA was told, now he could have died in bed with his wife, but if he did, he did it from being poisoned. You know what I'm saying? Because they killed him. All right. So they were they didn't want this autobiography to be printed, and the British came to Allen Dulles and said, we want you to kill Alan Brooke. So what's his name? Allen Dulles goes to President Kennedy and says, the British want us to kill this guy because he's going to reveal all these secrets about, the Enigma machine and all this other, that stuff that wasn't actually declassified until 1974, not 1960. Okay. So the bottom line was, John Kennedy said, don't touch him. We're not going to kill our allies' generals. That's a rotten thing to do. And don't loan them any poison. Don't give them any kind of special guns. Don't do anything to help them. And if you do, you're going to answer to me. Don't do it. We're not going to do business like this. Well, Allen Dulles killed him anyway. And I'm not sure how they did it, but Wikipedia says he died in bed with, but Wikipedia also says that Lee Harvey Oswald shot John F. Kennedy, and Lee Harvey Oswald was not one of the shooters. And so anyway, they killed Alan Brooke, and Kennedy found out about it. He found out that they had killed General Brooke anyway. And what happened was, that's when Kennedy came unglued, and he said, I am going to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and cast it into the wind. And then whatever, is left is going to be turned over to the Department of Defense. We're not going to have the CIA doing covert operations. And what they do, the way they kind of manage this is the U.S. military kills people under Title 10. And actually, this is a good learning point for everybody. I think, of course, there'll be some lawyer that will, come up and write some dissertation about how I don't know what I'm talking about. But I understand under Title 10, there's 3 bodies of the militia: the regular militia, the regular military, the reserve militia, or the reserve military, and the unorganized militia. Okay. And that's everybody. Now, between the age of 18 and 50, you could be drafted. Still to this day, they don't have the draft, but you could be drafted into military service. Any able-bodied person from 18 to 50, man or woman. Okay. And the Second Amendment of this country talks about, the unregulated militia being, well armed, can bear arms, right? And that's what it's all about. It's not about hunting. So when congressmen come up and say, why should you own a military weapon? Or why do you need a semi-automatic hunting rifle? You don't need that to hunt deer. It's not about, the Second Amendment is not about hunting. They can make hunting illegal tomorrow. It's not a constitutional right to deer hunt. It is a constitutional right to have inside your reach a semi-automatic 10 millimeter pistol with a light and a laser on it. I mean, you can, and an AR-15, if George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who his summer home is 2 miles from my house up here, Poplar Forest, it had AR-15s back in the 1700s. They would say people should own, AR-15s. It's for us to protect ourselves from tyranny. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people don't know this. If you go to Afghanistan right now and go up in the mountains where they don't have electricity or running water, guess what they do have? Every single home in Afghanistan, just about, the man is allowed for self-defense of his family to own a weapon. Even when we went in and raided villages, when we left, we had to leave their self-defense weapons with the men so they could protect themselves. And guess what they have? AK-47s, fully automatic. Okay? It's not, people think, oh, there's gun control in Afghanistan and we got to go take their guns. That's not what it's about. I mean, everybody understands if you live up in the mud hut in the mountains of Afghanistan, I mean, they have wolves there. You need a weapon. And they have, tribal wars and stuff like that all the time. People don't get along, just like the Palestinians and the Jews. It's been going on for 2,000 years. I spent a lot of time in northern Iraq helping the Kurdish people with Operation Provide Comfort in 1991. If you read the accounts of that historical account, we saved over 1 million people. Saddam Hussein ran them into the mountains of Turkey with helicopters, spraying them with gas and killing them. And it took 6 months to do.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
I'm looking over some different things, taking notes. Alan
Yeah.
Dulles, because I think it was actually Sidney Gottlieb that probably killed him, because Sidney Gottlieb was in charge of biowarfare, and I think he was also in charge of some MK Ultra projects. But Alan
Killed
Dulles
who?
killed the aforementioned individual, Alan Brooke.
Oh yeah, it could have been anybody at the
Yeah,
CIA. It could have been.
he was
It could,
involved with
I
biowarfare.
didn't mean. I didn't
That's
mean
just
to
my
say
assessment.
Alan Dulles killed him. Alan
No,
Dulles
I'm
was the
saying
director of the CIA.
under Alan Dulles was
Yeah.
Sidney Gottlieb, who was in charge of biowarfare, and they put him in charge of whacking the
Yeah.
beard or killing Castro with some very means. So that's just
Yeah.
my conjecture that he was involved in it.
No, yeah,
But
you could be right. It would have been one of the technical branches. It wouldn't have been Dulles himself. I mean,
right.
you know,
But Dulles,
yeah.
I found out, and I don't know why I overlooked this before. Dulles gets fired
Right.
after the
By
failed
Kennedy.
invasion of Cuba. He gets fired by Kennedy. But
Mhm.
why is he then on the Warren Commission?
There you go. Well, it's simple because he was still in charge. Let me tell you something else. Two things about him. It wasn't just Dulles that got fired. It was General Bissell and General Cabell. Kennedy fired three of them. Bissell and Cabell, look it up. They're two 4-star generals. Guess who General Cabell's brother was? Earl Cabell, the mayor of Dallas.
Right.
Yeah. So what happened was Kennedy.
It looks
came
like
unglued.
Cabal. The
Yeah.
last name
Yeah.
looks like Cabal.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that sounds like cabal.
Right?
Yeah. But anyway, so Kennedy came unglued and he fired Bissell and Cabell and Kennedy. Okay. But now he was fired in like 61, I think, or November of 61. He was retired and given an award, but trust me, he was fired. Okay. However, guess where he was 2 years later, November 63.
Are you talking about
He
Dulles?
wasn't working. Alan Dulles. He wasn't working for the CIA, but guess where he was? He was in Williamsburg, Virginia, at Camp Perry, the farm they call it. It's where the CIA, trains their spies. If you read 2 or 3 CIA books, you'll know this. And if you drive past it on Interstate 64, you can see the big signs that say experimental military facility and all that stuff. You can see inside it on Google Earth. You can see all the driving tracks, and they used to have a big. Last time I was there, they had what do they call that thing? It was like a wall, a wire fence, like they have in Eastern Europe. Between Czechoslovakia and on the border there, because they used to do these border crossing stuff. They train how to go over the fences and stuff. But anyway, and then also online, if you look at this up, this is no secret. It's on, it's on Wikipedia and all that kind of stuff. Just Google Harvey Point, North Carolina. And that's a facility. It's a joint facility used by 4 or 5 different agencies and the military. It's used by the Secret Service, the ATF, and it says this online. It's not classified or anything. CIA, FBI, ATF, Secret Service, and the U.S. military. One of the military schools that's there, a lot of the SEALs and recon guys and stuff go there for like breaching training. And there's a lot of contracts are done by like Raytheon. They do that. Like they've got a crew there that actually, when they're doing explosive door breaching, they've got a crew that all they do is put new doors on those buildings, and they support that explosives class. Years ago, you probably could look this up someplace. They had some kind of water survey right off. If you look at Harvey Point on Google Earth, on the southern edge where the explosive range is, you can tell what that is by looking at it. You can see the craters in the ground and all that. They used to do, just for the fun of it, to see how far they could blow stuff out into the water. And there's signs out there that keep boats out of that area, that water that's right around Harvey Point, okay? And they blew truck chassis and all kinds of stuff way out in the water. Well, somebody from like the EPA years ago came down through there and looked in the water, and they realized the explosives were blowing stuff out in the water. They thought it was like by accident. It was not. But
I'm going to interrupt again. So I'm looking at Clayton Bissell, Major General Clayton Lawrence Bissell. Okay. So I'm looking at all the stuff that he did. Says he was assigned to the office in 44, assistant chief of staff for intelligence in the War Department, general staff, served in that capacity the last 2 years of World War II, which we know that they worked with Operation Underworld with the military and the mob.
And paperclip.
Yes, and he says he was the Army member of Joint Security Control and on the Joint Intelligence Committee in the U.S. Army. It's amazing what you can find in Wiki, people. Just freaking
It's out
Wiki.
there. It's
Just Wiki
just
it.
look for it.
And U.S. Army of the Combined Intelligence Committee. Here's what I liked. He also served as the Army head of psychological warfare and the head of the War Department historical program. Really? Psychological
There you go.
warfare? That would be called
There you
MK
go.
Ultra as well.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go. So
Go on.
some of this training, like when I've got a picture that I can send you. I've got it on my laptop here, but somebody picked up with a satellite or whatever. This is an aerial photograph when they were training for the Bin Laden raid. They built an exact copy of Bin Laden's compound in Pakistan at Harvey Point, and I've got a picture of that. It was online. It's out there. You could probably
Why
just
did they do that? Did they do that for incursion purposes?
no. To see the SEAL Team 6 guys that went in and killed Bin Laden and took his body away, they had to be sheep dipped into the CIA because for the SEALs to go into Pakistan and kill somebody would have been an act of war. But the CIA can do it legally,
right,
under Title 50. I was talking about Title 10. The military killed people under Title 10. The CIA, they refer to it as extrajudicial killings. But Title 50,
they're entitled.
it's called Title 50 is the federal law that lets the CIA kill people, basically. And it's they've been killing people for a long time, and a lot of people they've killed deserve to be killed and should have been killed, or at least captured and imprisoned. You know what I mean? They were hurting Americans and our interests and stuff like that. Let's go back to James Files just for a second. If you want, we can do the Dealey Plaza thing, or you want, but I'll tell you one thing about him. He was involved in the overthrow in Chile. And we've talked a lot about this. And, the CIA interfered directly with Chile's elections a couple of times, trying to get Allende out. All right. And they couldn't do it. He was very popular and all that kind of stuff, but he was a communist. So he was going to turn Chile into a communist country. Well, after he'd been elected a few times, and, the thing a lot of people don't understand is what was Chile to the United States? Well, that's where not all of them, but a lot of our big copper mines. I think it's called Anaconda Copper. And the Allende announced one day that he was going to start nationalizing foreign company property inside Chile, and that Chile was going to seize the copper mines that belonged to American companies. That was the day he signed his death warrant. That was a suicide act. So they couldn't throw him out, mess with the elections and get him out, and put somebody in there that would be friendly to the United States. So they put together death squads. They recruited 3,000 cutouts that were Argentinians. Most of them were Germans, and they were the children of the SS officers, a lot of them that had come down there and, at the end of World War II. And the CIA calls them cutouts. So they got 3,000 of these Germans came down there, and they were death squads. And they just went around with people's names. Like if I took the voting rolls, and if Allende was, let's say in this country, was a Democrat, and they wanted the Republicans in charge, they literally just went around. And James told me that some nights they would kill 350 people. And they didn't just go in the house and find the father who was the head of the house that was on the local Democrat who was, in this case, were communists. They didn't hunt down the communist and kill the dad. They killed everybody. They killed the father, the kids, the wife, the dog, and they threw them out on the street, and they had dump trucks going around picking up all the bodies, and they drove those bodies up onto a bridge where there was a big river flowing through the capital city of Chile, and dumped those bodies in the river. And there was a picture in the newspaper down there at some point, and the fishermen were complaining because a lot of them fished with nets down there, And there were so many human bodies getting caught in the nets that they just stopped fishing.
Good God.
And that's how the CIA overthrew Chile, by death squads. And it's pretty easy to do. I mean, it doesn't take, I mean, if you think about it, you can overthrow a country by force in a very short period of time, a couple months, with 3,000 people.
Let's talk a little bit about the CIA operations, because you had brought it up about Chile. But was he involved in the Phoenix Project at all?
Yeah, he was. He was close friends with, they called him the White Ghost, Ted Shackley. He worked for Ted. And the MACV-SOG program, and it was called Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group. A lot of people thought it meant Special Operations Group, which it really did. That's what it was really about.
What was it called again? I'm sorry, Jim. Tell me again.
MACV, MACV-SOG, 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 Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group. And they were the guys that were the Green Beret that were running the teams with, they usually had be like 2 Green Beret and maybe 10, some of them were the Hmong people, some were South Vietnamese, but they ran special missions into Laos and Cambodia and stuff, and they were trying to interdict the resupply on the Ho Chi Minh Trail from North Vietnam into South Vietnam. And they would, I'll tell you one story about, one of the guys, he was I think a sergeant first class at the time, but it was Robert Howard. But he was put up for the Medal of Honor, I think 3 times, and he finally got it on the 3rd time. But, and there was an old friend of mine who recently died named Frank White, who worked for the DEA. He was a Citadel graduate like me. He was a young platoon commander in Vietnam, like a ranger, and he came out and came back to the United States and worked for the Bureau of Narcotics. He's a very famous DEA agent. And he used to do in Vietnam, actually in Laos and Cambodia, one of the things they did is they called it moonwalking. And they'd go on missions at night, and they would get on the Ho Chi Minh Trail wearing black pajamas and one of those like Vietnamese hats. And they would just walk up the Ho Chi Minh Trail and just walk right into the Vietnamese camps and start an intramural firefight between the people in the dark, because they didn't have any way to see in the dark. They would start throwing grenades and shooting stuff like that and then bug out. And then you'd have each other, they'd be shooting at each other. I mean, that's the kind of bravery these guys had. Frank was a DEA agent, 2 quick stories, in Miami. And he had a truckload of cocaine come in a warehouse one time, and they were going to arrest the guy. And he got up on the running board of the truck. They got it in the warehouse and closed the door so he couldn't get out. And he got up and pointed his pistol at the guy and said, "You're under arrest. Special Agent Frank White, DEA." And the guy floored the van and started driving through the warehouse. And Frank shot him 13 times, just bang, 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 and then the van crashed. They went to court, and the prosecuting attorney was Janet Reno. And she filed a big complaint.
Wow.
She filed a big complaint with the DEA and said, "Why did you shoot him so many times? Couldn't you have arrested him or something like that?" And he said, "He's driving inside a warehouse with a van load of cocaine, and he was threatening my life." And he said, "The reason I shot him 13 times is because my pistol only carried 13, not 14.
Yeah, Janet Reno actually was the who was she working under?
He was the Attorney General under Bill Clinton.
Right. So that Janet Reno was she actually did the
Waco.
Yes, she did Waco, and that's the individual that we've been having problems with, who was head of the Texas Rangers. He ran Waco.
Yeah. Well, Waco was.
I rode cutting horses with against some of the Renos. They showed cutting horses in the horse world.
How about that? But anyway, Frank White, he was transferred. They sent him out of. She said, "I want him out of Miami. Get him out of here." And he went to Chicago. He was riding a subway to work one morning, and a guy stepped on the subway, stopped in the car, and Frank's sitting there reading the newspaper. And not too far from him, in the in the subway car supposedly was one of those gumball machines mounted on a post, where you put a quarter in and get some gumballs. And this guy gets on the car with him, and as soon as the car leaves the station, he draws a gun and tells everybody to pull out their wallet and their money and their jewelry and all that kind of stuff, and he's going to rob them. And he didn't realize he was sitting, this guy was trying to rob Superman, So Frank draws his Glock pistol and shoots the guy right between the eyes. And as the guy was falling, he fired a second shot, and it missed the guy and hit that gumball machine, and the glass globe broke, and all those gumballs went all over the floor. And the guy's dead laying on the floor. And as the car is going down the tracks, rocking back and forth, you got 300 gumballs rolling around all over the floor. And it said it was surreal. You know what I mean? But that was Frank White. He recently, some friends of mine, he was a member of a shooting club near.
Is Frank still alive, Jim?
No, he just recently died. He was 75. And he's a guy like Billy Waugh, if you know who Billy Waugh was, or Dutch Waringa, or some of those guys that were Ground Branch and Green Beret. I mean, just huge American heroes, highly decorated guys, But back to James Files. So we were at, we were talking about Camp Hero and his education. He got to be 17, joined the Army, went to Laos, Bay of Pigs, and he gets sheep dipped by the CIA because he had an incident in where he killed a few people in Laos, and apparently the CIA liked his style, and they recruited him. David Atlee Phillips recruited him, and he started working for the agency. And he was first thing he did, was Bay of Pig stuff. He was training those guys how to do ambushes and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know how much of his life he would want me to talk about that I know about. But he was at the same time he got recruited. The guys back home knew who he was, and in Melrose Park, Illinois, and he was recruited by Charles Nicoletti to do work for the Chicago Mafia. And after Nicoletti was killed in the late 70s, Jimmy had possession of the murder ledger. And the FBI wanted to get that ledger. He mentioned it in his video. And at some point, they kidnapped him, and they had him in his custody. I mean, he was in their custody for 2 days. And he doesn't know where he was. He's in like the basement of a house or something. And they basically tortured him. And they wanted that ledger because they knew not only did it have the records of 66 Chicago unit, Chicago Mafia murders, but it had the record of the John F. Kennedy assassination in it. And they wanted that ledger. He wouldn't talk to him. He told him, "You can kill me if you want." And he thinks that they believe they did kill him. And they left him duct taped with his hands and his feet duct taped together on the ground, naked in a junkyard. And he basically woke up and was able to get free from the tape and make it home. Later, there's an FBI agent named Zach Shelton that lives in Texas. He's still alive. He's the one, Zachary Shelton, that busted Jimmy for the car theft ring he was running for the Mafia. And Zach Shelton told Jimmy later that when he got kidnapped, that it was the FBI. But they wanted that ledger. He just wouldn't give it to him. And later on, he dug it up, and him and a friend of his videotaped him burning it so that they wouldn't kidnap him again. And it's been destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore. But it had 66 murders in it, and one of them was JFK. You want to go back to Dealey Plaza and jump forward to that, or what do you want to do?
Yes. Let's go
I think a lot of people want to know. That's the big question. A lot of people say, what are the two biggest questions people want to know? And they want to know if aliens were real and who shot JFK. So
Right.
I'm going to answer. What time is it now? It's almost 11. That's my time. Eastern.
Yeah, we have 1 hour and 1 minute.
Okay. We taking any breaks before then?
No. You need
Okay.
a break.
All
If you want to go,
I will arrange for break music for later, but we don't have any right now because the
Yeah.
executive
Okay.
producer didn't put any up.
I can keep going. I in the next few minutes, so I might have to run to the little troopers room.
Okay.
But anyway, so
I had to take the dog already, so yeah, it's
Maybe you could show a video or
Comment.
something, Penny, if you got something when he run. You know.
I've got. Well, I'll give you something to talk about. But the thing about Jimmy is he's a fascinating guy. I mean, you know, and the other thing too is he's a super patriot. He loves this country. He's bled for this country. He's been injured for this country. But on the other side of that, he's a mafia hitman and a CIA hitman. I mean, you know, it's just he's lived a life of it's. I mean, he worked for the CIA for 28 years. I mean, it wasn't just like he was, you know, they hired him to shoot at John F. Kennedy and then, you know, ran him off or something. I mean, it was he worked and, you know,
From birth.
yeah, I can. There's a couple stories I'm dying to tell you, but I can't. But you know, after he's gone, I'm sure probably Pam will write a great book and tell everything. I mean, there's some really unbelievable stuff that he was involved in that I can't talk about. But he was at Watergate. I'm not going to give you any details, but I will say that he was sitting in the car with one of the guys who was not arrested. And G. Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt, and they're all in there burglarizing the offices and everything. And the guy asked Jimmy, he says, "Are you going to go in?" And he said, "No." He said, "Why not?" And he said, "I'm not a burglar. I'm a killer. If there's somebody in there you want me to kill, I'll go kill them. But I'm not going to go steal their stuff." And I mean, you can't make that up. You know what I mean? So anyway, but Jimmy was, he had worked for Nicoletti and they'd killed a lot of people. I'll show this a couple of times because some people are going to be really unfamiliar with this. But this is called a Remington XP100. It's chambered. It were made in a couple different calibers. This is chambered in 221 Remington Fireball. Okay, it's a little bitty cartridge, fires a 22 bullet. And then back then, they weighed 50 grains, which is not much heavier than a 22 long rifle bullet, but it was very fast. It's a very accurate gun. You can, and it was sold like it was kind of like a varmint pistol, and for groundhogs or whatever. But Jimmy tells me that Wayne Leake was contacted by David Atlee Phillips at the CIA, who was a deputy director in clandestine stuff. He ended up being I think he was deputy director of what they call the Central Hemisphere, which to them is Central America. So he talked to Wayne Leake at Remington in Ilion, New York, and they developed, and it was supposed to be built as an assassination weapon. It was going to be a scope-mounted bolt-action pistol, very accurate, and it was going to be small enough to put in a briefcase. Okay, so the bottom line is, Jimmy was he was told way months in advance that they were going to kill Kennedy, and the first place they were going to kill him was at the there was a big road intersection. I forget there's a nickname for it, but it was in Chicago. And Tony Accardo, the head of the Chicago Mafia, said, "No, we're not killing him in our backyard. That would bring too much. We don't want all that bad stuff in our backyard. It has to be someplace else." So they talked about New Orleans, they talked about Miami, and then after they got Lyndon Johnson involved, the answer, and they figured out that General Cabell's brother Earl was the mayor of Dallas, and Lyndon Johnson said, "Well, let's get him down to Dallas, and he can, we'll do it there." So they planned, the route was initially planned, to go straight down Main Street, but right kind of at the last minute, unbeknownst to, because it would be believable if the route was changed right at the last minute, sort of, that nobody could be prepared to do it. But they had the ambush all set up, so it was like a triangulation of fire near the Umbrella Man, right? So, but James knew about it months in advance, like as early as like March of '63. And I'm a car guy, so, and a gun guy. So cars, the getaway car was a 1963 Chevy Impala, brand new, white interior, Palomar red on the outside. It's kind of a burgundy shade. white bucket seats, 4-speed in the floor, 327 4-speed, Impala SS, 2-door. And that'll come into the play just in a few minutes. All right. So they decided it was going to be Chicago. And right up almost to the last minute, according to James, he was going to be the weapons bearer and the driver of the getaway car, that Chevy Impala. The guy who orchestrated some of the assassinations in Vietnam, some were only just months before that, was Major General Ed Lansdale. And he's the one that was the grounds commander in Dealey Plaza that day. He was an Air Force Major General, Edward Lansdale, L-A-N-S, no D. It's not Lansdale, it's Lansdale. And Ed Lansdale was on the grassy knoll up near Jimmy shortly before Kennedy was shot. Lee Bauer said at some point he saw two people standing at the picket fence right before the president was assassinated. And that was Edward Lansdale and James Files. There was a lot of people that were associated with the Bay of Pigs that were there. A lot of the Cubans, Viciano, and although he's not a Cuban, he's an Italian, I think, he is Italian. Frank Sturgis, that's not his real name. He changed his name.
Was Dulles there or no?
No, actually Dulles, that's a good question, because you remember Dulles wasn't at the CIA then. He had been fired about a year and a half earlier, 2 years. Dulles, and we know this from his, there's a copy of his desktop notes that are in his estate. Guess where Dulles was? He was at the farm.
Really?
He was in Williamsburg, yeah. And there's notes in his diary that says, for the day of the assassination, he flew on a Piedmont flight, I guess from probably Washington to Richmond, or maybe, I don't know if the Piedmont had service to Williamsburg, if there was an airport there, but he probably flew from Washington to Richmond, and then he had a driver pick him up and take him to Williamsburg to the farm. And he was there the whole weekend that Kennedy got killed. Now, who wasn't there that would have been there? And the answer to that is Fletcher Prouty. Okay. On this last Saturday, Fletcher Prouty has 3 kids. All right. There's David, Lauren, and I can't remember his other daughter for right now, but the baby is Lauren. And I went to a restaurant on Saturday with Fletcher Prouty's daughter, Lauren. She's one of my neighbors. And she said, "You need this." And this is a little penguin made of wood. And it was a gift given to Lauren. And you pull the string, and the penguin, his feet and his wings come up. But if you can read that on the bottom of this, if I can get it up near the camera, it says South Pole 18-19 November 1963. This little wooden penguin was the gift that Colonel Fletcher Prouty gave his daughter Lauren when he got back from the South Pole. If you watch the movie JFK, for some reason, he was sent to the South Pole. And the classified reason was he was going to help the Navy. He was going to provide security and some stuff for the Navy. They were going to start up a nuclear reactor to supply power to their big facility at the South Pole. But really, they wanted to get him totally out of the United States because he was the direct liaison between the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA in 1963. And he has a tremendous history. Lauren gave me a stack of photographs on Saturday. This is one of them. And this is Fletcher Prouty getting his certificate of retirement from a brigadier general in the Pentagon in 1964. He was so fed up with what happened with Kennedy, he would have certainly been a general. But he retired. He said, "I'm tapping out." And but he knew. And now if you read the book, which I have a copy here, called JFK, that the movie was made about. This was written by Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. His first name's Leroy. And you can see, I don't know if you can read that or not. Let's see if I can get it. But it says, "To Jim Scott, Lauren Prouty." This is an autograph. This was signed for me on Saturday by Fletcher Prouty's daughter. All right, now so Fletcher Prouty was. You can go on Wikipedia, and he has the most. And go on YouTube and Rumble, and just put his name in, L. Fletcher Prouty, and there are some of the most fascinating. He was an expert on petroleum oil. He was the guy that flew around our delegations to Saudi Arabia and worked it out with the British for like Aramco, so we could get oil from Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. Oil is the second most common liquid on the planet. It is not a fossil fuel. It's never been a fossil fuel. That was made up in the marketing to make people think that there's a limited supply of it. The Earth's crust is slam full of oil. Okay, and we haven't even taken the tip of the iceberg of oil, burned it yet. Okay, thank God. Okay, so I'm all about, wind is great if the wind's blowing, and solar is really good if the sun's shining. But if you want to do something with a farm tractor, you're probably not going to have an electric battery powered farm tractor to plow a field with. So.
Although I did see a video and a Tesla went underwater like a submarine, but hey,
yeah,
I would know one of those things if somebody gave it to me.
I don't know how long they last like that when you get water and all that circuitry, but anyway, so Jimmy, we'll go back to Dallas, and basically what happened was he drove from Dallas by himself in that '63 Chevy Impala SS to Mesquite, Texas, and checked into a hotel room there. He didn't know it at the time, but one of his old friends from his childhood, actually named Gary Marlowe, was down there to help the team. But he didn't know everybody that was down there. All this is very compartmentalized. The mafia, you know what you need to know, just like in the military, right? And if we have time, I'll tell you a story about a mission I flew on the border of Iran one time. And I didn't know that there was a rescue team. If I had been shot down or something like that, I had no idea they had a team waiting to rescue me if we had been, but I got sent in kind of as a guinea pig, and but our mission was successful and we didn't have to do that. Years later, I meet this guy and he goes, "Yeah, I was your cover for that mission." And I go, "What do you mean?" And he tells me all about it. And he said, "I was on the barge out there in the Persian Gulf and was going to cover you, if you had been shot down." So it's crazy. But anyway, that's how compartmentalized it is. But anyway, so James goes down, checks into the hotel in Mesquite. And for 5 days, he was with Lee Harvey Oswald. And what he did is they went around, and Lee Harvey Oswald, they had the same controller, David Atlee Phillips. And as they traveled around Dallas, they checked out all the roads. They knew where the railroad crossings were. They figured out what the escape route would be. And James said, the one thing is, I hope that if they ever make a movie about this, is that when they show me driving off in this '63 Chevy Impala, that they don't show me spinning my wheels and peeling out of there and running like a scared rabbit, because I drove away like a professional, just like I was a businessman leaving for lunch. And he said, I don't want him to Hollywood it up. You know what I mean? But so anyway, Lee Harvey Oswald, he traveled they went to this pancake house. Johnny Roselli went with him. They picked up Secret Service identifications. They think that they were actually genuine, that the Secret Service actually provided those to them. There were members of the Secret Service that knew Kennedy was going to be killed. One of them certainly was probably Landis, the one that's recently came out and said he's the one that put the magic bullet on the gurney, and also the driver, William Greer. And that's a story in itself. If you look this up, there was a Secret Service agent that died of a mysterious heart attack, a young, physically fit guy named Shipman, who was supposed to be the driver. And apparently about a month before the assassination, he backed out of the plan. They read him into it, and they said, look, this is what we're going to do. The CIA is going to kill Kennedy. He's like, you're out of your damn mind. I'm not going to participate in that. You guys are. So they sent him on a special assignment to Camp David. And he accidentally died in his sleep on a couch. And you can look that up. Special Agent Shipman, that he died it was about a month before the assassination. Then they put William Greer in as the driver. Here's the interesting part. William Greer was not a Secret Service agent. He was a chauffeur in the Secret Service Uniform Division. And he usually would shuttle the cooks and the bakers and, you know, the people that worked in the White House. He would take them out shopping and stuff like that. And once in a
I
while, he
wondered
would
if
drive.
he was related to the Greer that we know of right now in the disclosure industry, Dr. Stephen Greer. We're going to
Stephen
take
Greer.
a short break, Jim, so you can just take a
Okay.
little bit of a break, and we're going to play a video on Prouty. It's about 8 minutes long, so that'll give you a little bit of a break.
All right, there's two videos that people I should watch. One is it's on YouTube, called The Sensational Colonel Prouty, something like that, or The Sensational Fletcher Prouty. And there's another one about him talking about fossil fuels. It'll
Right.
totally wake you up if you watch them. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Ah.
This subject, which I'm going to get into, I might call the anatomy of assassination or the politics of assassination. Assassination is a big business. In fact, assassination is the business of big business. I've written quite a bit on this subject in various magazines, and for those of you that have managed to get past some of the pictures that occur in some of those magazines, you'll know that in November issue of Genesis, I wrote on the subject of the Kennedy assassination. Last month, March issue of Genesis, I wrote about international assassinations, and I have to write 5 months ahead of time. I have an article completed and in the mail on the 24th of March on assassinations, in which I talked about the possibility of further assassinations in the Middle East. And as I went to the post office on the 25th with a newspaper under my arm about the assassination of King Faisal, I had the intention of taking the article back home and bringing it up to date. You see, it's that kind of a subject. What was your first thought when you read about the assassination of King Faisal? What goes through the minds of the perpetrators of assassinations? Are we again confronted with a young man that was a lone nut who kept a diary and friends on a grassy knoll down there in Saudi Arabia? Or was the king killed by some sort of a machine or conspiracy that had other plans for actions in the Middle East? Mr. Kissinger had left the Middle East the day before. Mr. Nixon had tallied in Dallas until the morning of the assassination. So there's a theme running through these things that the king is dead. But what is the meaning then of the controls that go through these things? In this case, the resumption of power in Saudi Arabia almost seemed to be a little too even, too easy. What had really happened there? And I think what had really happened there will give us a picture of what goes on in assassinations, how they come about, and then we can take that kind of a picture and begin to unravel some of the others, and we might come a little closer to the mark. Technically, what happened in Saudi Arabia is that the king's guard, the king's elite, was broken. Now, you can keep a man alive. If you don't believe that, read your history of General de Gaulle. Even in the deepest and darkest days of World War II, there were thousands of people who would like to have had a shot at de Gaulle. I remember after the Cairo conference in Marrakech, Morocco, Churchill was recovering from a bout with influenza, and de Gaulle came to visit him several times. You can't imagine the security precautions that were taken in Morocco to keep the good general alive. I was in Lima, Peru in March of 1964 when de Gaulle came and captivated the country of Peru. Hundreds of thousands of Peruvians filled Plaza de Armas to such an extent that they were pressing against the walls and trampling the trees. And yet, General de Gaulle, who, a good many inches taller than I am, walked among these Peruvians that night with searchlights on him in that huge arena among hundreds of thousands of people. And there wasn't a person took a shot at him. Because in the 6 months before he went to Lima, the people whose business it was to keep de Gaulle alive, the guerrillas, if you remember their term of endearment, had thoroughly worked over the city of Lima, had combed every list for people in that city who might be anti-Gaullist, had provided them with resort hotels a long way off, and had made sure that when the general came to town, he would stay alive. What is it then that keeps these people alive? In every country, the king would not live if there was not an elite guard. And who trains the elite guard? The Vanell Corporation. It seems to me that there's a point to the subject which appeared just a little while ago in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and a great number of other papers, to the effect that there had been a contract issued with the Vanell Corporation, and I don't have any idea what their corporate connections are, and the Defense Department of the United States, and the fact that the Vanell Corporation had signed this contract for the purpose of training, first of all, the National Guard of the Saudi Arabia, and National Guard there means more or less police, and the King's elite guard. I wonder which king they had in mind, because when you control the elite guard of a country, when you train that guard, when you arm that guard, when you teach them to jump from an airplane at Fort in Georgia, Benning, and in Fort Bragg, give them all kinds of weapons training and bring them down to Camp Perry in Virginia where there's a nice little resort. That guard knows how to keep a man alive as long as that guard agrees to keep that man alive. So I don't know whether the death of King Faisal preceded the work of the Vanell Corporation or whether the Vanell Corporation's contract began on the 25th of March, but it's awfully important because whether those men stay alive or not is the function of their inner guard, because once you relax the guard, you open up a hornet's nest. A lot of people would like to control the bank accounts of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Dhofar and the rest of them. And what keeps the king alive is not the election of the populace, because they don't go through that routine over there. It's simply his guard. So this is a key to it. And the guard in many of these countries throughout the world, where there have been so many coup d'etats, a euphemism for the work of mechanics or assassination, these guards for many, many years, in my experience for more than 20, 25 years, I was in Saudi Arabia in 1943 on clandestine activities, is the work of the Central Intelligence Agency. And the people who let the contracts for the Central Intelligence Agency are called the Department of Defense. And then the people who do the work are called such companies as the Vanell Corporation or Air America or some of these others. So you begin to see what comes about. And since I didn't come here this afternoon to really get into the assassination picture too deeply, I wanted to set a stage for it. So let me jump to some of the things that we know about without having to dig too far under the surface. That in 1953 the CIA had a problem, only this time it was in the country of Iran. And Mossadegh died of lead poisoning, and the Shah, who was escaping to the Riviera, was brought back to resume the long 2,500-year line of Cyprus, King Cyrus, and now he leads the country of Iran at the pleasure of the agency's #1 man in the world today, Richard Helms, who is called ambassador. And so as long as the guard in Iran can keep the Shah alive, he'll be our man there. And as long as the Shah is our man, he'll probably be alive. In Jordan, where King Hussein jets around, and lives by grace of his elite guard. That guard has been trained through various corporate devices by the Central Intelligence Agency for at least 20 years. And King Hussein has about the same chances of surviving that Faisal or Hassan or the Shah have, and that is that if he plays the game, his guard will take care of him. These are important considerations because they're right there in the record. The thing is that we in this country don't think of it that way very often. You see, they don't have elections in many of these third-tier countries. How do you replace somebody? This evening we'll hear some talk from Mrs. Allende.
Very interesting.
Oh.
Now, was he talking about the king? Was he talking about the Shah of Iran?
Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. And then also, he talked about Richard Helms, Mr. MK Ultra,
Yeah.
who testified in front of the church committee and said that they destroyed the records, which that was a big fat lie because they never destroy anything. Those records went somewhere, and
They're in the archive.
well, they may be in the. Are you talking about like the archive that is on display?
No, they're
Okay.
they're in the classified CIA archives.
Right. Yeah.
You
So
have to
that was
have
a big fat lie.
clearance to read them.
He said he destroyed them. He did not.
No, probably not.
No, he didn't.
Rick. Oh gosh, I forget his name right now. Anyway, I was going to say Rick Prada, but it wasn't Rick. It was his predecessor.
I
Anyway,
just was wondering also, when you showed me the penguin, did you say he was sent to the North Pole, not to Antarctica, right?
South Pole.
Oh, South Pole. Okay.
Yeah. It says South Pole 18-19 November 1963.
Right.
And there's the little tags from the stand. They got these little stores down there apparently. And there's little tags on here that identify where he purchased it. And they're all faded and falling apart. I had to tape one of them up because it was crumbling apart. But he went to the South Pole. You know, they just sent him down there to get him totally out of reach of any where he couldn't take any action.
Are you also acquainted with the aviary? The term the aviary. It's a covert.
I know what it is. I don't know what you're referring to, but I know what an aviary is. But go ahead.
No, it's actually, if you Google the aviary, it has nothing to do with birds. It is a covert group of individuals, which John B. Alexander was the penguin in the aviary. Yeah,
like
I think
that's
a condor, etc. And you know, I'm still wondering why my husband put a penguin on my car, a Chili Willy on my car, without my knowledge.
Yeah,
I was angry about it because I think I was marked.
Yeah,
I think I was maybe marked as one of John B. Alexander's because he ran the psi programs. So not to get too much off of target here. Let's go back to James Falls and take us down that journey. We have about another half hour.
Okay, so let's go back to Dealey Plaza and get through that. And I'm gonna mix two stories that are eyewitnesses and that had talked to, that were either part of the team, which was James, and also Robert Clayton Buick, who was an asset of the CIA and spent years in prison with Johnny Roselli. Roselli got busted. They were running a gambling scam in Hollywood. Roselli was in charge of Hollywood for the mafia. And they had a thing at the Friars Club where they had secret cameras where they could see people. They used to play high-stakes poker games with a bunch of the celebrities, and they could see their cards. And they got caught, and he got busted, and I think he got sentenced to 5 years for that.
Shoot.
But he was in prison for for this, basically stealing from these guys. And he was in prison with Robert Clayton Buick. And Robert Buick was a really famous bullfighter from Mexico. He was an American. And they used to refer to him, I think he was called the something Tornado was his was nickname. Anyway, but the bottom line is this is what happened. So after they were all prepared for everything, and there's a famous picture on one of the Life magazines of Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly holding the rifle that was used in the assassination, which was a 6.5 Italian Carcano. But that picture from right here on his chin down is Roscoe White's body holding the rifle. And from right here on the chin up, he was photoshopped. Lee Harvey Oswald's head was photoshopped into the picture. They actually showed him that picture, and he laughed and said, well, that's not me. That's photoshopped. And that's on the record. So, but anyway, the day of the assassination, Jimmy rode with Nicoletti down to the Dealey Plaza. They parked the car kind of on the corner there at Houston and Elm Street. He had a sheet of paper that he put on the dashboard that said official police business, Dallas police, don't touch the car, that kind of thing, which I think is, I would have thought they would have had somebody in the car stay with the car, but that's the way he operated. He took they walked and if you'll listen on YouTube or on rumble.com under James Fowles Confession, this is all described in great detail by James. But he walked with Charles Nicoletti on the Dealey Plaza, and he asked him, he said, look, I guess Lansdale wants you to be the backup shooter. Where would you be? And he said, well, I'll be on the grassy knoll behind the picket fence. There were some small trees there. Now, today, the picket fence is behind the trees. There's the fence, and there was a parking lot, and it was a dirt parking lot back then. And then there's trees in front of or behind it. And then in front of the picket fence, it was just a straight fence. And then from the fence from where he fired, about 8 feet from the corner, where the 90-degree corner of the fence is down toward the sidewalk, he was about 8 feet up from that. We had the 221 fireball poked over the fence like this. And I've got a reenactment photograph that if you want to do the show again like this, I could send it to you ahead of time.
He said it was muddy that day too when he was walking over to the fence.
Yeah, that's right. He had mud on his shoes and all that kind of stuff. But he had the fireball in the black briefcase, and Kennedy was running 30 minutes late. That's one thing that a lot of people, which is kind of weird because if Lee Harvey Oswald was going to kill Kennedy, why was he seen in the employee lounge drinking a Coke, not out of wind, after it happened? If he knew that, if he had been upstairs on time, he wouldn't be down in the employee lounge eating lunch. But that's where he was told to be. He was doing what he was told to do. And so anyway, Jimmy's on that was about 10 o'clock in the morning. James went up to the picket fence and positioned himself up there. He kind of walked around for a while. He said he took his jacket off. He walked back to the train cars, was walking around like he was checking train cars, like he worked for the railroad. And he was just scoping out cars and stuff like that. There's one woman, I forget her name.
Where Harrelson was found?
It wasn't Harrelson.
Wasn't he in the train cars? Wasn't he back at the train cars or something?
Not Harrelson. No. Okay. It was the three tramps, the middle tramp, and actually the front tramp also has been identified erroneously as Harrelson. I don't know who the middle tramp is, but the front tramp is Charles Rogers. He was one of the team members. He was an assassin. And James says he was crazy. He loved to kill people. And actually, I think the CIA killed him because he's the guy that if you look up the Icebox murders, his parents found out. His parents had kind of screwed him financially. And when he came back home to Dallas, he'd go off and work for the agency and then come back home and live with his parents. They had borrowed money under his name and spent some money that he had in the bank and some stuff like that. But also he was talking, and they sort of figured out that he was involved some kind of way in the JFK assassination, and he killed both of them and chopped them up and put them in the icebox. If you look
Well, they
online,
arrested Harrelson for Judge Wood's murder in San Antonio, and he didn't do it.
that's right. Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, James Earl Ray, he didn't shoot Martin Luther King. Another CIA guy killed Martin Luther King. And
So did
Sir
you want
Hans
to
Scott.
elaborate on that?
Do
What's
what?
that?
Did you want to elaborate on that, or we're just going to leave it there?
Which one?
Well-
Martin Luther King?
No, Susie?
Oh, Judge Wood. Judge Wood was known as Maximum John because he would give him the maximum sort. He was from San Antonio, judge, and there was a big drug case, and I know Catherine Chagra, who's Jimmy Chagra's daughter. She lives in Bastrop. Her dad. I met Jimmy Chagra when I was in Key West, and he was not a killer, and he was charged because he was competition, in the drug world. So he was set up. Charles Harrelson was set up to take the fall because I guess Charles was kind of a loose cannon or whatever. And the Judge Wood could not be bribed. They offered him like $10 million. They couldn't bribe him. He would give everybody the maximum sentence. So that's why they took Judge Wood down. It was the second highest money spent case after JFK's case. Judge Wood was in San Antonio, and it's still an unsolved case. Yeah, but the real shooter, got away, and Chagra got out of prison later, but Charles Harrelson ends up dying in prison for something that he had no part of, and he said he didn't have any part of it, but he did mention that he was involved somewhat in the JFK case. So I just want to throw that out there.
He might have been, but he's not. He wasn't one of the three tramps. It was Charles Rogers was number one. The third guy was Chauncey Holt, and he ran what was called a floating press. He did a bunch of stuff for him, but he was like a technical support guy. He's the guy that would do passports for him and stuff like that. It's a skill the CIA, has. And these mercenaries. Oh, by the way, James Files worked under the name Colonel John Felter, Felter, for the United Fruit Company. I believe it was headquartered in Miami, but today that's called Chiquita Banana or Chiquita Brands.
Really? Oh my God!
Yeah, that's where the word.
I say to everybody, "Good afternoon, Chiquita Bananas. Hola, Chiquita Bananas."
Yeah, that's.
I used to collect those Chiquita Banana stickers and keep them in my kitchen.
Yeah.
Remember Carmen Miranda? I'm Chiquita Banana, and I've come to say.
Right.
They had
the fruit on your head.
Two mercenary armies. One was called the Wild Geese, and the other was called the Mirage. And there was a British colonel named Mike Hoare. You can look this up. They actually did a movie about the Wild Geese back in the 80s, I think, late 70s, early 80s. And it was called the Wild Geese. And they were a mercenary army, and they overthrew countries in Africa and stuff like that. And they basically were, working for the U.S. government and other governments, the Brits and all that kind of stuff. They use mercenaries to, move into countries to get oil and all kinds of whatever they want, But there was two things I wanted to cover real quick. So Jimmy's behind the picket fence. Kennedy comes along. There's no guards. There's no Secret Service guys, except for the two sitting. And remember, William Greer, the driver, is a chauffeur for the uniform division. He wasn't a Secret Service agent on the presidential detail. And then I think the guy I can't remember the name of the guy. It wasn't Landis. I think he was back on Lyndon Johnson's vehicle. But there are two guys sitting in the front seats of the limo. Then you had John Connally on the right, Nellie on the left in the middle, and then JFK and Jackie in the back. And Jimmy was told, whatever you do, he said, just back me up. We're going for a headshot, but don't let him get by you if I miss and he had been hit in the head. Okay. So Nicoletti missed a few times. So there's a famous photograph called the Ike Altgenes. James Ike Altgenes took a photograph right after Kennedy was hit in the throat, and he raised his hands up like this, which exposed his wristwatch out of his shirt sleeve. James Files used a bullet that was filled with, it had a droplet of mercury in it. I don't want to get into the ballistics of that, but it just makes the bullet it doesn't explode, but it has an expansion a very violent expansion. Explosion is not the right term. This book was written. It's called The Inheritance. Okay. And this book is about that wristwatch. The Cartier wristwatch that was on JFK's wrist that day was given. It went to RFK, and he gave it to one of his, like an illegitimate son. That wristwatch, not long ago, was auctioned off for really, really big money.
What illegitimate child, by the way? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'll have to. I think this book is written under an assumed name, but it says Christopher Fulton and Michelle Fulton. That was a husband and wife, and he's the guy that owned the watch, I think. But anyway, it was passed down through the family and then sold at auction. And the people that knew about JFK being hit by the mercury bullet had the wristwatch tested. And on the face of the wristwatch, there were specks of mercury. Okay, so that proves that James Files' story that he used a mercury bullet, or somebody, you know what I mean? Let's say if he didn't do it,
Right.
Somebody did. All right. Because he said, I shot the guy and I used a hand-loaded bullet. They were hand-loaded by a man named George Calora, who was a former Marine who was their kind of armorer and took care of their weapons. And they had a like a Connex box at a warehouse, and they had all the weapons that the mafia used in Chicago were stored in that Connex box. It was locked up in a warehouse, and it was a place where they worked 3 shifts around the thing, around the clock back then, and nobody could get to that Connex box except for the people that had the key to it. But it was guarded all the time. There was never, and those were the weapons that they used. But this book, The Inheritance, talks about this Cartier wristwatch that JFK was wearing when when he was shot, and it had mercury on it. Okay, so that's one of the important
Can you tell us a little bit about the bullet that James bit into too, and how the agent knew about that?
Not the bullet. The bullet hit Kennedy in the head. The casing, which I could actually get you one really quickly if it would take, but they're only about a little over an inch long. It's a little small brass casing. It's called a 221 Remington Fireball. Okay. And the hole in it where the bullet goes in was for a 50 grain bullet. There's 7,000 grains in a pound. So a 50 grain bullet is very light. A little 22 long rifle bullet usually weighs between 30 and 40 grains. This is a 50 grain bullet, little teeny thing. And he handmade the bullet. What you do is if you've got a bullet mold, if you have it takes a hand press to do it, and you need a die. And then all you need is a copper jacket and a lead core, and you just put it in there and you press it up in there and it makes the bullet. People hand make their own bullets all the time.
Right.
But what you can do is you just put a little small plug of lead in the bottom, and then you put a droplet with like an eyedropper. You put a little droplet of mercury in there, and then when you close it up, you can put a wax seal on it. But you can't spin those bullets too fast and run them at too high velocity, because the jackets will fail and they'll come apart in the air. I actually have a picture of a test bullet, and actually lead bullets, if you push them too fast with a really thin jacket, like out of a 220 Swift or something like that, you get them going about 4,500 feet per second. The jackets will fail. And what happens is the actual surface lead right under the copper jacket will melt when it's going down the barrel. It's so much pressure behind it. And when it comes out of the barrel, the jacket will fail and liquid lead will splatter on the target. I have a photograph of that where that happened. Somebody ran some bullets out of a Lee Enfield about 4,800 feet a second or something. The bullets came apart. So the mercury was inside the copper jacket. It's easy to do. It's not rocket science, And so George Calora hand-loaded that for him. James explained that 4 days after the assassination, he told David Atlee Phillips, when he got debriefed in Chicago, David was the CIA officer that was his controller. And he explained to him that George Calora, his nickname is Wolfman. And another thing, if you look at, because y'all are musicians, I think, right? So the Hall of Fame rock and roller Bob Dylan came out with a song. He hadn't made songs in years. Okay, George Calora died, and he knew a lot of the secrets of the JFK assassination, so he wrote this song. And if you look it up on YouTube and look at the lyrics, it's got a lot of secrets about the JFK assassination. And the name of the song is "Murder Most Foul, Foul, Murder Most
Wow.
Foul.
I thought that
And
was a
it's
play.
not, it's a long song. It lasts about, I think some of the versions with lyrics are, it's longer than 16 or 17 minutes.
Is Dylan singing it?
What?
Does Dylan sing this song?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't listen to the guy's voice.
No, he actually is kind of like talking the song. It's almost like he's reading a poem. But it's, yep.
I
Yeah.
almost quit a job because they had Dylan Hour. I said, dude, you have to stop playing this or I am leaving because this man cannot sing. He also made a deal with the devil, as far as I know, at the Crossroads.
He wouldn't make it through the first night of American Idol, but he's in the
wouldn't.
Rock and Roll.
Hey, don't quit your day job, Dylan.
Yeah,
but he did write about this murder.
Yeah, Murder Most Foul. Look it up. It's a fascinating song. It's got a lot of secret. But the reference in there to Wolfman is to George Calora. There's also a reference. He says Wolfman Howl. He's talking about Wolfman Jack, the DJ. But there's two references in the song to Wolfman. The first one is to George Calora.
Okay, because I met Wolfman. He actually, when I was in Modesto and we were playing a Janet Jackson song called Escapade, he introduced us. I got in a tiff with his Samoan guys that were guarding him because they wouldn't let me on the stage. And so I said something really stupid, Jim. I said, I leaned over the guys and I said, there's 5 guys in here that could take you out in a second. I need to get on that stage. And the guy got up and got up and got up and got up. And I looked at him and said, hi, would you be my friend? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you, but I really do need to get on the stage. And then he said, do you know why I'm here? And I'm like, not really, to be a cement wall. And he said, I'm guarding Wolfman Jack. And he said, that's him right there. And I said, hey, Wolfman, can you please introduce us? I gave him my mic. Can you please introduce us? And can you please tell your goons over here to let me back on the stage? And he said yes, and he introduced us.
I wouldn't take Wolfman Jack as really needing protection.
Oh, actually, he did. He had 4 Samoans around him. These huge concrete blockers.
Yeah.
And they were his bodyguards. I don't know all the stuff that Wolfman was into. I just know that I had an encounter with him in Modesto. And then Billy, my bass player, was like, how are you getting to know all these people? I said, I almost got killed by one of them. So, because my mouth.
So let me digress here just for a second. So Jimmy's behind the picket fence. Charles Nicoletti's on the 2nd story of the Daltex building. That office was prepared 2 weeks in advance. Eugene Hell Brading was not E. Howard Hunt, but one of the Hunt brothers, his adopted son. And they took all the furniture out of the office and set it up as a sniper's nest. It's the photograph, if you can get it, the Alt Jeans photograph in the front. If you look through the windshield of the limo, you can see Kennedy's got his hands up to his throat. He's been hit in the throat. The Secret Service agents have turned around and looked back because they've heard the shot. You look at the fire escape on the Daltex building. That's not the school book depository. On the 2nd floor, right under the fire escape, okay, there's a spotter sitting on there telling Nicoletti, hey, here they come, get ready, all that stuff. And he's keeping people off the fire escape. They were shooting, the windows open about 14 inches. The offices to the right and to the left the windows are full of girls looking out the window. They worked in those offices. But that office where nobody's looking out the window, but the window's open, is where the shots came from. So Nicoletti fired like 3 shots, I think, out of that window. And the first 2 were misses. Okay, I think the 3rd shot hit Kennedy in the back of the head at the same time, literally almost at the same instant. And there's a book that just came out. I thought I brought it over here. But it came out, and the autopsy results, it's called something like standing to the right of the cold shoulder or something like that. But the autopsy, the original X-rays or whatever were found, and they say it shows evidence of an impact from behind and in the front. And they're able to tell that the impact from behind, from ballistics, that it was a big high caliber bullet, which it was, a 30-06. none of the weapons used in the assassination were 6.5 millimeter. That's what the government says. The CIA says, and the Warren Commission. And like you said, you pointed out, why in the hell, after you got fired, would Alan Dulles be on the Warren Commission? But he was really the kind of the leader. And the Warren Commission was the government cover-up. Now, here's one of the interesting points, too, about the assassination. How can James Files come out right now and say, I killed John F. Kennedy? How can he do that? Now, hang with me, because you're going to roll your eyes when I say this. In 1963, it wasn't against the law to kill the president.
True that.
It was a murder in Texas, but there was no federal law that made it against the law to kill an elected official or anything like that. It was a murder.
I just thought, Jim, that the reason why he wasn't prosecuted and still isn't prosecuted is because of the top secret information that's been redacted by the redactors of the redactors.
Right.
A matter of national security.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's the really the bottom line is they're going to have to admit that we've been lying to you for 61 years.
Discovery.
Oh.
So if they
You've been lying to us a lot longer than that, there, Jim.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, so you had shots coming out of the second story of the Daltex building. You had James that was the backup shooter that took the last shot that's in the Zapruder film, the shot that hit Kennedy right behind the right eye and took the top of his head off. Jackie
now, didn't he leave his teeth marks on the shell of that?
Yeah, I'll go back to that right now because I didn't answer your question. I'm sorry, I didn't do that. But anyway, that brass casing, after he took the casing out of the gun, he put it in his mouth. Now, a lot of people can't believe you could bite a brass casing and put your teeth marks in it because they're pretty strong. But a lot of people don't know about Jimmy. He got his teeth knocked out in Laos in Vietnam in 1969. And that would have been after. No, I guess so. So I guess it was in Laos. But anyway, he had dentures. He still wears the same dentures the military gave him today. And one of his trademarks is he used to put it in his mouth and bite down on it. And then he put the cartridge on the fence. After the video came out in the 90s, somebody went up there and hunted around, and they found that casing with his teeth marks in it. And they got it tested, and the forensic test said they were dentition marks. But everybody wanted to cover that up. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So that it's out there. The information is out there, but that's a really good point about it. But they found the casing right there at the fence, right where he had left it. It's the wind or something, or somebody had knocked it off and it fell. It was in the dirt right there. And anyway, so James took his shot and killed Kennedy. The car sped off, but according to Robert Clayton Buick, there was another shooter in there, and James claims that was just him and Nicoletti. And the compartmentalized part of that would have been, because there were witnesses that saw a rifle barrel sticking out of the sixth floor of the school book depository. But it wasn't Oswald, and the shooter wasn't trying to kill Kennedy. It was Mac Wallace, Lyndon Johnson's hitman, and he was trying to kill the man sitting in front of Kennedy. He wasn't trying to kill John Conley. He was trying to kill a man named Ralph Yarborough. And there was a fight at the airport, and this is well known. Johnson wanted Senator Ralph Yarborough, who was a liberal Kennedy Democrat, to ride with Kennedy in front of Kennedy in the seat. Lyndon Johnson was friends with John Conley, the governor of Texas, and he didn't want him to get hurt. But he did want Yarborough dead. They wanted both of them dead. And the plan was Mac Wallace was up in the 6th floor school book depository, and he was going to fire 3 shots, 1 shot and kill Yarborough, and then 2 shots just shoot him off, into the dirt someplace. You know what I mean? But if you needed,
whatever came of Yarborough, what's the story on him?
Look it up. Ralph Yarborough, he served his term. He was in Congress he was a senator for a long time, and then I guess he got voted out or something. But Lyndon Johnson didn't want him to be the governor of Texas. He was worried that he would go back, and then this kind of liberal Kennedy progressive stuff that they didn't like would spread through Texas. So
unfortunately, the family that raised me, Buck Steiner, he told me he gave Johnson the money to go to Washington, and they were actually related to the Conleys. The Steiners were, yeah.
How about that? Well, I know that there's a thing called, if you look it up, it's called the Billy Estes Bobby Baker affair, and Lyndon Johnson, for 17 years, was J. Edgar Hoover's next door neighbor. They used to borrow each other's lawnmower and all that stuff. If you can imagine that back then, that they didn't have somebody to cut their grass. But the bottom line is Johnson wanted not just Kennedy, because he had a lot to gain. He was going to be the president of the United States, but he was fixing to be the Life magazine the week before the assassination. The cover of Life magazine was called like the Bobby Baker affair, and it tells the story. And he was going to be indicted for like 9 murders, Lyndon Johnson, but also he had been stealing money from an agricultural grant program to the tune of like $25 million. And stealing money for his own, putting it in his pockets, government money, just like they're talking about, Biden giving money to Ukraine and then the money coming back through FTX from this, what's his name? The kid that just got 25 years, that he gave $40 million to the Democrats, to fund their campaigns and all that kind of stuff. The FTX.
Well, I heard through Blake Steiner. Blake told me that the good old boys, that's what they called them, Johnson and all them, they joined the Chicago mob, and so they all kind of planned the entire murder. And I worked 2 blocks from the Capitol and 2 blocks from the governor's mansion. So I used to see Lady Bird. She used to come in our store all the time when I worked there. So,
wow. Yeah. Well, the thing was, the party at Clinton Murchison's house the night before the assassination, they were all there. Even the mafia guys. Jimmy was there. James Files, Sam Giancana was there. Almost everybody except for Kennedy. He got invited, but he didn't go. He was afraid they might try to hurt him. But
they were afraid they would kill him then.
Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover was there and all that stuff.
J. Edgar was there.
One of the things. How much time do we got? 4 minutes.
Actually, we are running out of time. What is that?
People write this address down. This is the address. I wanted to share this with everybody if they want to order James Files' book. It's JFK Murder, jamesfiles.weebly.com. JFK Murder, jamesfiles.weebly, 2 E's, WEEBLY.com. And you can get the copy of Primary Target JFK. Like I said, it would help them out. The great thing is you can get an autographed copy. Also in Robert Trumbull Crowley, I need to mention this, wrote this or gave the material for this book, Regicide, written by Gregory Douglas. In the back of this book, it's got what's called the Operation Zipper letter. And I can send it to you if you want. It's about 20 some pages long. But it explains the plan. They had a kangaroo court, and they convicted in secret John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy of high treason for allowing the Russians to put atomic weapons in Cuba, and they sentenced both of them to death. And it was called Operation Zipper. And it explains 5 pages, explains lots of the details. And it explains that was their excuse. The government, the CIA, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a bunch of them got together and had this like secret kangaroo court, and they convicted him of high treason, and it's all explained in this book, Regicide. That regicide is to kill a king. Homicide is kill a person.
Yes.
Wow.
There's a lot more to talk about if you want me on sometime in the future.
Yes. There's so much more.
I want to thank you, Jim, so much for coming on.
By the way, this is how you die of lead poisoning. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I heard that. I heard the lead poisoning. I know what that's
what he's talking about.
I have a lot of that sitting right in front of me on my
desk. Or mercury poisoning.
That's right. Yeah, JFK died of mercury. One other quick thing. If you go 1 block from Dealey Plaza, there's a JFK memorial, and it's a huge white box with these round circles on it. Kind of weird if you look like an artsy thing. James Files told me that JFK's body is not in his grave. JFK's body was put in a white concrete box with holes in it, so the critters, the shrimp and the crabs and stuff, could get in and eat him. And his box was sent off in the water off the coast the same way JFK Jr. was supposedly, his body was buried at sea, with a U.S. Navy ship. But John F. Kennedy, his body's in a concrete box, and it would be nothing there left, I guess, today. But right off the Martha's Vineyard where his family is, and it's a white box with holes in it. Isn't it ironic that the JFK Memorial in Dallas, Texas, right a block from Dealey Plaza, is a big white box? Look at it on Google Earth.
Not a coincidence. Nothing's a coincidence. I don't.
That's
think.
right.
No.
The CIA killed John F. Kennedy.
We have run out of time, Jim. I thank you
Yes.
so very much.
Thank you, Jim.
for
Thank
coming
you.
on. And Susie, can you tell people where they can find you?
Here Friday and Saturday nights, and on the Awake Nation.
Yes, she's
Kenny
on the
L.A.
Awake Nation
Shepherd.
every other Friday, and I
And
am
Dave
executive
Zublik.
producer
Yeah.
for the Awake Nation, and we are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central and 9 to 12 Eastern. So please join us at theawakenation.com or at David Zublik's channel on Rumble.
Yes.
There's a lot more to talk about. Also, the
There is.
trademark. I'll send you a copy of the trademark speech. One of the reasons
Excellent.
they killed him also, he was going to disclose that the Roswell crash was true.
Right.
Right.
That's the
Nice.
speech. I've got a copy of it. I'll send it to you. I'll email it to
We'll
you.
definitely bring you back, Jim, because I know you got a lot.
Brenda, you can talk about that. Brenda's
know,
father
you
worked
come
at
back
Area
and we can
51.
talk.
Yeah.
Yes,
All
we're out of time
about
right now,
that
guys.
stuff.
We're out of
Hey,
time.
if
We're out of time.
are we all
We're out of time, Jim.
Yeah,
okay?
we got to go. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us. And we will see you tomorrow night. And like always, be kind to each other. Bye-bye.
Amen.
Goodbye for now from Beyond the Box. Inside, outside, upside, downside, beyond the box. Please join us again for Beyond the Box, Friday and Saturday evenings from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern. Join us for more intel bombs with our extraordinary guests.
Break it down.
Inside, outside, upside, downside, and beyond the box.
Break it down.
Good night, Putin. Good night, Tucker Carlson.